All right. Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from today. And welcome to our Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Geographic, and I'll be your host for today. Just a little reminder that it's been a busy start to the school year. We're going to host by the end of the month over 50 live events for classrooms to join across North America. So if you do want to take a look at what's coming up, exploringbytheseat.com, you can see all the events we still have coming up over the next few days. And then we're going to launch October's events shortly as well. And I have a feeling there'll be another 40, 50 or more live events coming up. So this month, one of our themes has been ocean plastics. We've been talking to scientists, researchers, explorers, artists, all who are researching the issue, who are documenting the issue, who are looking for solutions for this global problem. So we do have several events still coming up this week, diving into that world of ocean plastics. And I'm really excited to be taking a little trip to the UK right now. We've got marine biologist Imogen Napper joining us. She's a National Geographic Sky Ocean Research Scholar. She developed her love of the ocean from a young age when she learned how to sail and surf in her seaside hometown of Bristol in the United Kingdom. Some of her recent work has helped influence the ban of microbeads in cosmetics internationally, and her research has also been the first research piece that specifically looked at different fabric types, trying to understand how many are coming off of our clothes when we do wash them. So I'm going to bring Imogen in live with us right now. Imogen, how are we doing today?
Hi, everyone. I'm good, thank you. Thanks for inviting me on.
Oh, of course. It's great to have you joining us. We've got great classrooms joining us from across North America. I think I see a couple in the UK sneaking in as well in the chat, which is great. I'm going to let you take over for a little bit. And while I'm listening in, I'm going to pull a few questions together for Kahoot. We've been doing Kahoot since we started in September. The classrooms love them. So we're going to see how on the ball they are and how much they're paying attention today. So I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Okay, let me get started. I'll just share my screen. Bear with me 1 second. Hopefully you can see my screen. Shout if you can't.
Yeah, it's loading up now. Looks good.
Brilliant. So I'm delighted to be with you guys all today. I'm actually in sunny London at the moment. So good afternoon or whatever time it is around the world where you are. And this whole talk is going to be me explaining how I've used my curiosity to fuel research and how you can too, and join me in being a plastic detective. So my whole career is looking at being a marine scientist. So my love for the oceans and growing up in that small seaside town called Bristol in the southwest of the UK has really fueled why I want to protect it, like many of you on this call, I'm sure, as well. And then this led me to being a plastic detective. I was so curious at where all of this rubbish on our beaches was coming from and how we can use science to fuel making a difference. And I'm excited to tell you a little bit about that story coming up. But most importantly, what I want you to get out of this talk is how you can be a plastic detective too. So where did it all begin for me? Well, like I just said, I grew up in a small seaside town called Bristol, and it's a beautiful place where we look over the estuary to our neighbouring country, Wales. Has some really good fish and chips and some pebbly beaches. And this is me with my dad when I was about 3 years old. And my most favourite thing to do when I was that age was to draw in the sand. And I could draw in the sand for hours and hours. And my parents said it was the best babysitting service. And I could draw animals, I could draw planes, and the tide would come in, washing away my pictures, leaving a blank canvas for the next day. But I never remember there being any plastic pollution on the beach. And sadly, this is what we see now. And I was actually walking my cheeky dog Rhubarb at the back. If you can see him, he's the black and white Springer Spaniel. And this was completely unplanned. We were in Cornwall, and it was just looking like confetti all over the beach of plastic. Different colours, different shapes, different sizes. And it angered me. It made me think, where is all of this rubbish coming from? And if this is happening in the beaches near where I live, This must be happening all over the world. So I was able to turn that curiosity of where all this plastic was coming from into research, where now I'm this plastic detective looking at the different sources of plastic and how it's getting into our environment. But to be a plastic detective, like I hope you're going to be a plastic detectives by the end of this call, it's important to understand what plastic actually is. And I want you to think of it like a Lego brick. And to the right, we can see a monomer, which is made out of carbon and hydrogen. So imagine the Lego brick like this, carbon and hydrogen. If we put this monomer, all of these Lego bricks in a long chain, it creates a polymer. So a long chain of carbon and hydrogens. And basically, that is the most basic foundations of what plastic is. So the cover to my phone case is basically long chains of carbon and hydrogens. And it's really revolutionized the way that we live. So this is me in my old living room, and I was trying to explain how useful plastic is and have a look around this picture to see what you can identify as plastic. So I'm sat on a plastic sofa talking to you through a plastic computer, wearing plastic clothes, I've got plastic lanyard, plastic headphones, my plastic elements of my phone next to me. I've just come in from work, so I'm having a biscuit, so I've got some plastic wrapped biscuits to the right of me as well. So you can see just how much it's been useful in our day-to-day life. But if you look around the room that you're in right now, have a look to see what's plastic, because I think that you'll be surprised. So what's the issue? I've said how amazing plastic is, and it really is, but what are the downfalls? What are the issues? And it's how much we make, and for unnecessary reasons. So this is actually a picture of Life magazine around the 1950s, and this family is so excited to have plastic in their life that they're throwing it in the air, and it's single-use plastic. So have a look closely, and you could probably see some cups, some bottles, some straws, and it was going to revolutionize people's lives because they wouldn't have to do the washing up. They could purely put their food on a plate and then chuck that plate away afterwards. But we don't know how to deal with all of this waste. So I wanted to be that plastic detective to identify where's all this unnecessary plastic coming from and how is it getting into our environment. So I dedicated my whole PhD, my whole research into looking at the sources of plastic into the marine environment. And when we think of sources of plastic into the marine environment, we might consider litter dropped in towns and cities, lost fishing equipment, or even litter dropped at the beach. But I thought it was important to investigate the sources of plastic we don't always typically think of. So my research looks at 4 main areas. So I've looked at facial scrubs, the washing our clothes, carrier bags, and rope. So let's delve into these a little bit deeper. So plastic used to be put in our facial scrub called microbeads, which are tiny bits of plastic that was abrasive, so it'd help us get nice and smooth skin. And truth be told, I actually used to use these products, but I never considered that there'd be plastic in them. So we wanted to do some research looking at how many could be in one bottle. So I looked slightly crazy, going to all of the different shops and getting loads of facial scrubs for my testing. I'd then be in the lab for hours and hours extracting all of the tiny microplastic bits. So you can see the facial scrubs at the back there, what I was extracting in the little glass canisters. And to the left, you can see something called vacuum filtration, where I'm sucking through the water, and then on top, it will leave a layer of plastic on a filter that I have. And what did we find? Well, this is the shocking thing. So in the glass vial at the front, you can see how much plastic was in that one bottle. We found that 3 million microbeads could be in one bottle of facial scrub. So on a squirt on your hand, there could be over 10,000. Imagine washing your face with 10,000 microplastic bits. They then go down the drain, potentially through the sewage treatment works, and then into our ocean, making it a big plastic soup. But why is research really important in this? Well, research was able to influence legislation around the world banning microbeads as a completely unnecessary plastic. And it was really exciting that this small research piece that we did at the University of Plymouth could have such a big effect. We went back 2 years later and tested the same products, and we were delighted to see that all of them had removed plastic from their products itself. The next bit of research that I did was washing our clothes and how many tiny plastic fibres could come off. To prove a point, the dress that I'm wearing is made out of polyester. And when clothes are swishing and swirling around in the washing machine, tiny fibres can come off, go down the wastewater, potentially through the sewage treatment works, and then into our oceans. But we wanted to investigate how many fibres were coming off our clothes. So this was my lab, where I spent many a day, many a night washing clothes again and again and again. And it was pretty mind-numbing, but the results were really interesting. So we tested polyester, acrylic, and polyester cotton blend jumpers. And this is what we found. So up to 700,000 fibres could come off your clothes in a typical clothes wash. Now multiply that by your town, a street, a city, and how many times you wash your clothes a year. That's a huge proportion of fibres potentially entering the marine environment. And this is what it looks like in your hand, a tiny ball of fluff. But we didn't want to stop there. We saw that there's a problem, but now let's look at that solution as a plastic detective. Let's see how we can try and make it better. So this is where I collaborated with National Geographic and Sky Ocean Rescue. And rather than one washing machine, I now have 4 washing machines, so I can do lots of testing. And we were actually doing some testing, looking at different filtration methods that can go into the washing machine to try and capture the fibres. So watch this space, because it could be the future of washing our clothes. The next bit of research that I did looked at biodegradable and compostable plastics. And when I think of the term biodegradable and compostable, I often think of something like an orange or a banana that's going to break down quickly. But how about plastic that's called biodegradable? So I got lots of different carrier bags that were either biodegradable or compostable or just normal plastic. I cut them into strips. And using an old drumstick, so I played the drums, some fishing wire and old garden netting, I sewed each strip into a pouch. And then I buried them in the soil. We put whole bags out there as well, because it's just easier to see visually. Outside in the sunlight, and also we put them in the marine environment, so being exposed into the ocean. And it's the longest experiment I've ever done. It was over 3 years, and we took samples every 9 months. So what did we find? Well, the bags that were outside completely fragmented into tiny bits. It doesn't mean that it's disappearing, but it's just going to these tiny micro bits, and microplastics are less than 5 millimeters in length, and it's actually breaking down by sunlight. So sunlight introduces an oxygen into those carbon and hydrogen chains that we saw earlier, breaking it up. So that's harder to clean up. The ones in the soil, well, scarily, they were all still there. The compostable bag had lost a substantial amount of weight and of strength, but it was still there too. And how about the ones in the ocean? Now this was really exciting, because every time we pulled it up, it was like a marine zoo. So lots of sea squirts. You can see some sea squirts on the picture here. And bristle star, so some starfish. But the scary thing was all of those bags, apart from the compostable bag, which did disappear, were still there. So when I hear the word biodegradable, but knowing that all of the bags were still in the environments, it confused me. And it could still hold a full bag of shopping. So this is a biodegradable bag that's been in the ocean for 3 years, and it can still hold a full bag of shopping. And it's a heavy bag of items I was going to have for the week, such as cereals, some beans, some pasta, some bananas. I'm not saying that these aren't a solution for the future, but it's clear that there needs to be greater education to the consumers and industry of how we work. They often need something called industrial composters that need really high moisture, really high heat, maybe a certain pH to break these type of plastics down. So it'd work for like a football stadium. We could collect all of the plastics and take them to an industrial composter, but not for you and me just going about our day-to-day life using this plastic. Because how do we get it there? Our newest research looked at rope. So you guys are some of the first to hear about it. And rope, especially in the maritime industry, it can pull really heavy weights. And we just wanted to see how much it was fragmenting. So when a fisherman is pulling in a haul of fish, or if a yachty, someone that's got a yacht, is pulling in the sails, how much of that rope is fragmenting directly into the sea? To do that, we tested it on a boat, and also we replicated that in the lab. And we found that the older that the rope got, the more microplastic that was snowed from it. So we found that for new rope, it was about 20 microplastics per meter hauled, so per meter pulled. But for older rope, it was more, around 700 microplastics. So is plastic pollution everywhere? And this led me to the Ganges of this wonderful research team here, all the way from India and Bangladesh, America and the UK. We did the whole of the River Ganges, going from the Bay of Bengal all the way up to the Himalayas. And the River Ganges is polluted, but so are many other rivers around the world. This provided us with the perfect sampling site to investigate plastic from a river going out to sea, like a conveyor belt. So I'll tell you a little bit about our team. This is our team, and we went out on these tiny boats every day. So this is our favourite blue boat and our orange boat. And we were getting a whole 3D picture of where plastic was going. So how much was in the sediment, how much was in the air, and how much is in the water. So here's us taking some sediment samples and some water samples. And what did we find? Well, we found that 3 billion microplastics go into the ocean every day. And what does that look like? About 35,000 every second. Now, this is just the River Ganges. So what's it like for other rivers around the world? And it's really shown us that rivers are this huge conveyor belts taking plastic from the river out to sea. And how about on the tallest mountain on Earth, Mount Everest? I was very lucky that National Geographic expedition team took some snow samples for us all the way from Everest Base Camp to near the summit. Here's me with one of the sampling containers. And this was taken from Everest balcony, which is just 400 meters below the summit. And what did we find? Well, see how many fibres you can see on this picture. I can count around 5. And we found that there can be up to 70 microplastics per litre of snow on Mount Everest. So imagine a water bottle and there being 70 microplastics in that. So it's shown us that plastics are in the rivers, they're in our mountains, they're in our oceans. So plastic is really everywhere. And that's why we need to act now to make it better. So all of this research created lots of discussion, a bit of a media stir, but it really taught me that me and you and everyone is part of the solution to make this change and make our oceans clean again. And small changes can make a big difference. So your own individual actions are really important. Only choosing a facial scrub that's got no microbeads in or is completely plastic glitter free could stop millions of microplastics entering the ocean every day. Only washing your clothes when you need to could stop hundreds of thousands of plastic fibres entering the ocean on a daily basis. Making sure that your ropes, if you're going out to sea and you're a fisherman, are properly maintained and out of the sunlight so that they can last longer and fragment less. And also for carrier bags, can you keep reusing the same carrier bag, or have you got a cotton tote bag that you can take shopping with you? So please join me as a plastic detective and turn that curiosity into action so we can make our planet green again. And everyone is part of the puzzle to make this change. So thank you very much for listening to my talk, and I look forward to all of your questions.
All right, amazing, Imogen. And thank you for being such a good plastic detective, really looking at some of those sources that I don't think we think about all the time, from ropes to clothing, and then some of those things that we think, like those biodegradable bags, we think we're making those good choices. But depending on where you live, they're, as you've proven, they're difficult to break down. So thank you for sharing that with us today. All right, well, those who are tuning in with us, I'm going to pop up a link here on the screen to a Kahoot. So if you follow that link, it will take you to the page where you need to put in a PIN code, which I'm going to provide very shortly. So those who are tuning in, whether on YouTube or you're in the classroom right now, if you have one-to-one devices, amazing. You can set up your one-to-one device, or the teacher can do it at the front of the room. You can shout out your answers as a group. Even if you can't get connected in time, you can still shout out your answers and see how well you were doing. So let me share my screen here. Let's bring up the code. There we go. All right. Our PIN for today is going to be 4901705. So we'll give a few moments here to get some students starting to join with us. Here they come. Remember, there's going to be 4 questions today. You have 20 seconds per question. The right answer is pretty darn important, but the quicker you can put that right answer in, the more points you're going to get. So we'll give it another 30 seconds or so. See how well we were listening to some of those amazing facts and statistics in Imogen's presentation today and see what stuck with us today. Very cool. We're going up over 100 pretty quick. All right, Imogen, lots of students hanging out with us today.
Oh, that's awesome to see.
Yeah. Okay, maybe 10 more seconds. I'm going to hit start on that first question. Here we go. Remember, speed means nothing if the answer is incorrect. So take a moment and we'll follow the progress. We'll see how everybody is doing. All right, question 1 on our quiz. Where did Imogen grow up? Was it London, Bristol, Dorset, or Bath? Wow, this is a fast group. There was 100 answers in like 2 seconds. Pretty impressive. All right, most went with Bristol. Good job. People were paying attention. That's awesome. All right, there's a look at our leaderboard there. We can see who's popular on that one. And let's get on to our next question. So, how much microbeads could be in your hand in one squirt? Luckily, they've been banned now, but was it 100,000, 1,000, 100, or was it 10,000 in one squirt? An average squirt. How much could you potentially have been rubbing on your face and then heading down the drain? All right, good job. Most went with 10,000 potentially in one squirt. Okay, let's see if we've had any shifts in the leaderboard. Oh yeah, we've had some movement. Excellent. We're halfway there. Let's see how we do. Next question coming on. How much plastic fibers can come off in a single wash? Was it up to 700,000, up to 1,000, up to 15,000, or up to 1,000,000? What did Imogen's research show? Which one of those numbers? All right, up to 700,000. Leaderboard. All right, we've had a big shift in the leaderboard. Henry's taken the lead, but he's got some competition and anything can happen with the final question. Here we go. What does sunlight do to plastic? Does it decompose it? Does it break it into smaller pieces? Nothing? Or does it liquefy it? What did we learn today that sunlight does to plastics? All right, so fragments it, breaks it down into those smaller pieces, into microplastics. And the podium. Hannah taking third. NDB Bio in second. And Henry held on to the last 2 questions to keep the lead. All right, great work to everybody tuning in. Everybody was clearly paying attention. Good stuff. Let's move on now to a little bit of Q&A action. So let's stop that screen share. Get rid of that banner. All right, Imogen. We've got some great classrooms joining us live in camera spots. We've got great classrooms joining us via YouTube. So those classrooms can send in your questions. Let us know where you're tuning in from, and we'll work some of those in. In fact, a few groups have already said hi. Westminster Ponds in London, Ontario. Toronto, All Saints is joining us. Edmonton, Alberta. Peterborough, Ontario. So a few, and India too. So we've got a little bit of a spread today on YouTube. All right, Mr. Shattuck's crew, grade 6, 7, and 8, hanging out with us in Chalk River. How are we doing today?
Good, you?
Good, good. Who's got a question for us? Looks like you're ready.
How much does it affect the fish?
How does it affect the fish?
How much does it?
Oh gosh, how long is a piece of string? So the problem is with all of the wonderful wildlife that we've got in the oceans, including fish, that's just making our oceans into a big plastic soup. And how do we remove all of this plastic that's so small? But something that's discussed a lot is that fish can sometimes mistake these tiny plastic pieces as food. So if you have a fish that eats that plastic bit, and then a bigger fish that eats that fish, and something else that eats that fish, it means that that plastic is going up the food chain, potentially to us if we eat it. But we just need to stop our oceans being this big plastic soup and take all of the plastic out, stop it getting in there so it can be clean again.
Absolutely. That's a great question. And in some of our other chats, we've talked a little bit about how plastic can hold on to contaminants in the water. And then we just don't know yet really how much it is affecting fish or even us. So there's still a lot of research to come out on that, but I have a feeling it's not a good thing to be taking in those contaminants. All right, where should we go now? Let's go to Ottawa, Ontario this time. Some grade 8s hanging out with us with Miss Fwies. Let's bring them in. There we go. How are we doing, grade 8s?
Salut, bonjour. Allison, you have a question.
How can we test for microplastics in like our own backyards?
Say that a little louder, sorry.
How can we test for microplastics in like our own environment, like our backyards, for example?
How do we test for microplastics in our own environment? So, a scientific question. It depends on what kind of environment you're looking in. So in the ocean, where it's water, what we've done before is we filter that water directly over a mesh. So all of the water bypasses through, leaving any solids on top. And we can take those solids, those microplastic pieces, back into the lab for further analysis. So we look at their size, their shape, their color, and what type of plastic it is. If it's soil or something a bit more sludgy, it makes it more difficult. And we could spend hours underneath a microscope trying to extract all of the tiny bits. You can do something called density separation, where you mix something like soil or sand in a very dense solution, such as sodium chloride. So all of the plastic, because it's less dense, floats to the top. All of the denser material floats to the bottom. And that means that we can scrape up the plastic from the top of the solution and then take that back to the lab. But good question.
All right. And then what about, would you recommend any tools if students want to sample like a local water body or something?
Oh gosh, you could do so much. So there's a really good app called Marine Debris Tracker. And this is an app you can use on your phone. You can walk around your waterways, your town, a city, where you live, and you can track how much litter you find on the ground. And this goes to anyone that wants it, but particularly to scientists that can have a look at different trends and what litter is accumulating more in certain areas. But I urge you to go, especially for the microplastics, go and take some water sample from a local river if it's safe to do so. And then maybe even get a coffee filter, and you can pour the water over the coffee filter and then have a look closely if you can see any microplastics. The things you're looking out for are fibers. They're very abundant.
All right, excellent. Little field work for our classrooms. All right, let's go to Louisiana this time. We've got Mr. Dupree's crew hanging out with us. Let's bring them into the call. There they are. Hey, Louisiana, how we doing?
Doing great. We are a lot of fishermen here in Louisiana, and when you mention rope, that's a big problem, especially if your boat is outside all the time. So is there a specific type of rope you would recommend that we buy?
Okay, so I've done a lot of research into rope recently, which is something that I never thought I'd look into. In the UK, there's something called polysteel, which is a mixture of polypropylene and polyethylene together. And it's not so much that the rope is the bad thing, it's how old it's getting and how used it was. So my top tips are keep it out of sunlight, keep it in storage. As soon as you see it fragmenting more than usual, replace the rope. And we need to start looking at best practices together. So always keen to have an open discussion with fishermen about how we can try and change the way of fishing to try and stop less microplastics entering the ocean.
All right, excellent. Well, we're going to zip over now to the coast. We're going to go to the west coast of California. We've got Mrs. Gerard's crew hanging out with us. Let's bring them in. Hey, everyone, how you doing?
Hello. Hi, we're good. How about you? Okay. So we're asking, how can we collect microplastics from like our clothes and other aspects of our daily lives, and then where can we put them so that they don't go into their environment?
Good question. So it really depends on the source you're looking at. And as you can see, there's so many different sources of plastic. How do we stop all of it? So if we're looking at washing our clothes, we actually did some research looking at different filters that can go into washing machines to try and capture the fibres. So watch this space, because it could be the future of how we wash our clothes in the future. We'd have to remove the fluff. And unfortunately, the main method at the moment is to put it in the bin. But that will go to landfill, and that will be an enclosed area, so at least it's not in the environment. Other things that you can do is just consider your own plastic footprint. So always think ocean. Even if you're buying a facial scrub, have a look at the ingredients list and double check that it's got no microbeads in. Or if you're getting a carrier bag, think, do I need to get this carrier bag, or can I reuse one at home? So it's lots of little choices like that that's going to have a really big footprint in your life.
All right, great question. I do want to share that link you were talking about before, Debris Tracker. We had Catherine and Taylor join us from the Jamback Lab earlier this week, and so they shared a bit about Debris Tracker and some of the things that they've been up to. So really cool app to get into some citizen science action and contribute your findings, your classroom's findings, or your findings from home with a larger community. Okay, where do we have to go now? Mrs. Ball's group. Let's bring them in. There they are. We've got a grade 10 class hanging out with us there. I believe, let me double check. Yep, Godrich, Ontario. How's everyone doing today?
How are you doing today?
So good.
Good? Hey, come and stand. Come on up. You can ask from there if you want.
Where would you say the microplastics is like the worst at? Like, where is it the worst kind of?
That's a really good question. I can say the source, I think, is, in my eyes, in my personal opinion, one of the most troublesome is clothing, because so much of our clothes, over 60% of our wardrobe is made out of plastic. Even as I'm sat here talking to you, plastic fibres are coming off my dress, off my clothes, going into the air. So there's loads of different ways that plastic fibres can then get into the ocean. If they go into a river, rivers act as conveyor belts for plastic going out to sea. But then we've also got sewage treatment plants, and it depends on how effective they are in trying to capture any of the plastic that's unfortunately entered the sewage treatment plant, whether that be microbeads or fibres from washing our clothes. And some can be really effective, up to 99% in capturing the plastic, but with the sheer amount going through, even that 1% could still be millions bypassing sewage treatment works and going into the ocean. So imagine a city where so many people are washing their clothes. And then sometimes the sewage sludge, which is the solids that are collected from a sewage treatment plant, are then put on land as fertilizer. So then all of this plastic is potentially entering land, and then it could potentially enter the ocean again by there being surface runoff. So you can see it's really complicated, and there's many links of how it can get into the environment. But for me, the main sticking point that I'd love to solve at the moment is clothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it is such a good point just to think about how much plastic, fibers, microplastics have just kind of permeated our planet to the point where you can't take a water sample without finding them. Snowfall in the Arctic is containing, little plastic fibers as it's carried in the wind. So it's definitely, somewhere we need to be turning our attention and finding a way to kind of, well, I guess the 4 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle, and refuse when we can. All right, Belleville, Ontario, Miss Woodland's crew. All right, how we doing?
Good. What made you choose the experiments that you chose to do?
Say it a little louder, sorry.
What made you choose the experiments that you chose to do?
Oh, good question. It was all about curiosity, really. And I was thinking about plastic that I use in my day-to-day life that I wouldn't typically think as pollution. Typically before, and still to this day, when I think of pollution, I think of a bottle or a bag dropped at a beach. But there's something really fascinating about there being pollution from our clothing and our facial scrubs, and plastic being in all of these different products I never considered before. So it's really telling an untold story and opening our eyes that plastic is useful, but also in so many unnecessary applications.
All right. And so we've got a few minutes left, Imogen. So I'm going to turn things back to our groups and see if we can work in a couple more questions. So if you want us to swing back to your class, you can send someone up to the camera or just give a little wave. I think I see someone in Mr. Shattuck's class already. There they are.
When you take a sample, is there a certain amount you take?
So say it a little louder, sorry.
When you take a sample, is there a certain amount you take?
Oh, good question. A certain amount you take. Yeah, there's a really good question, actually. So for water samples, because it's so dilute, especially in a river where it's so fast flowing, you actually have to take quite a lot to try and get the amount that you need for analysis. Often if you take 1 litre and there's 1 fibre, you have to be careful it's not contamination from yourself and the clothes that you're wearing. But then up in Everest, when they were taking, quite small amounts because they couldn't carry that much, you're still finding potentially up to 70 microplastics per litre of snow. So in water, you have to take more. In soil, where it's not moving and it can be more concentrated, you can take less, but then it's more annoying to try and analyse. So it really, once you have a research idea or research questions, these are all the questions that you need to ask. So on the way to being a plastics detective.
All right. I think I see someone in our 8th grade class hanging out by the camera. Let's bring them in. Oh, can you grab the mic for me?
There you go. How do we figure out, as a community, how do we figure out how much our sewage system is dumping plastic out into the water and how much it is filtering out in our community so we can figure out how much plastic's going into our water?
Was that for sewage treatment works?
Yeah, no, like I'm just asking, can we figure out how much our system is doing compared to different systems?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And there's loads of systems out there. So if you were going to do that, you'd look at a before and after. So you would see how much in the system that's going in, how much plastic is there. And then after it's done its filtration or it's being bypassed somewhere else, you'd also do a sample after that to see how much is being collected, how much has gone through. But that's a really typical way that we would do it in science experiments.
Yeah, I think he's curious too. Do you know if you contacted your local sewage treatment plant, could they kind of give you an idea of the systems they're using or how effective they are?
Yeah, definitely. And we're working with them. And it's a really nice partnership because I don't believe that any company realistically wants to be polluting. So there's strength in unity. So I know of a lot of friends that are working with waterways or sewage treatment works and understanding how they can try and make their systems or their processes more effective so that they can try and be more environmental.
Okay. All right. So maybe 1 or 2 more. Give me a wave if we need to visit your crew, if you guys have another question for us. I think I definitely, oh, yeah, there we go. Let's go back to our chemistry class.
We were wondering where you're working, if you're working with like the university or National Geographic.
Say it louder, sorry.
We were wondering if like where you were working right now, if you're working with the university or working with National Geographic.
So a bit of both, really. Once you're a National Geographic explorer, you're an explorer forever, and I'm extremely grateful to them because they funded a lot of my science projects. They're funding one at the moment looking at the amount of plastic waste we're accumulating and making due to COVID. But I'm based at the University of Plymouth. So the University of Plymouth is where my lab is and where I do my research. And then the National Geographic is where we get these amazing opportunities to come and speak to people like you and also to get our word out there, our research on a platform.
All right. And yeah, I mean, just looking into the classrooms, you can see many with their PPE, some of it disposable. you just have to go for a walk around your neighborhood to find, that it's escaped and it's on the ground. So I'm looking forward to seeing the results of that study, because I have a feeling a lot of it is making it into our waterways and then down to the ocean and such. I think I see someone standing in Louisiana. Let me see if they have another question for us. Oh, they might be doing announcements or something. Never mind. We'll let them off the hook. Okay, let's steal one more from Mr. Shattuck's crew, because I see someone waiting. There we go.
How long have you been researching?
Oh, good question. So I would count, I think you're a researcher whenever you're researching a question, so you can be as young or as old as you want. I've been looking at plastics since I was 22 or 23, and I'm nearly 30, so nearly a decade.
All right. Well, I definitely hope that we have some more plastic detectors out there. I hope everybody tuning in with us today will take time to kind of look around them and see how much plastic they're using, how often they're using it. Is a lot of it single use and things like that. And then look for, easy lifestyle changes you can make to start having an impact. Even, things like washing your clothes a little less. Sometimes it doesn't have to go in every single time, especially if it's a sweater you wore over top of something. I want to start off with a shout out to our YouTube crew. Thank you so much for all the groups that joined us there and sending in some great questions. A shout out to our live camera classrooms and everybody who joined us for the live Kahoot today. And then Imogen, it's always great to steal a little bit of your time, even though the London internet gave us some issues at the start, but we figured it out. We got it going. It was great to catch up with you today and learn more about your research.
Always a pleasure. Thank you guys for being patient, and hopefully speak to you all again soon.
All right, we'll pop in a few groups here if you want to give a big wave or a big shout out. There we go. Thanks everyone for hanging out with us today, and have a great rest of the week. Thanks everyone.